I've had a question in the comments on one of my previous YouTube videos and I've answered it there, but I thought it was a pretty good question to address. The question is, what if your centimeter to blur measurements and your Snellen chart measurements are different? Which one's right? Hi, I'm Gemily and I'm following Jake Steiner's EndMyopia method to get back to 20/20 vision and life without glasses. It's all based on science, not magic, and if you want more information, I'll pop some links in the description down below. So, if your centimeters to blur measurement and your Snellen chart measurement do not match up, which one should you trust? That depends. The fact is that there are a few ways that you can mess up a bit in either of these measurements, so it's kind of working out which one you're doing not quite right. With the Snellen chart measurements, you are trying to work out which line you can read. Chances are, if you have more than 1, maybe 1.5 diopters of myopia, you're going to look at your Snellen chart and none of the lines are going to be particularly clear. So if you have more myopia than that, then you're going to have to be looking at your Snellen chart with some correction on as it is. Your full correction glasses should give you 20/20. Chances are, if they're from an optometrist, they'll probably give you even more than 20/20 vision. But 20/20 vision would be a great normal full correction, and 20/30 would be a good normalized, maybe even 20/40 if you like a bit more of a challenge. The thing with your Snellen chart is that if it is too dark, you're going to find it harder to read, and so you're going to feel like you need stronger glasses. And if you have it in full daylight outside, you're going to be able to read more. So getting the right lighting situation for your Snellen is going to make a difference. Otherwise, your Snellen results are going to be all over the shop. The main thing is that your Snellen results are consistent, but I do think that outside in full sun is going to give you far too optimistic a result. And in a dark, gloomy room, it's going to be far too pessimistic result. The best place for a Snellen chart, in my opinion, is in a brightly lit room. As I've shown you in a previous video, I have used the lux meter on my phone to try to make sure that the lux on my Snellen chart is about 1000. That would be my goal. And I do use ring lights or lamps to help me achieve that, as well as obviously benefiting from some natural light, although natural light will fluctuate depending on the time of day, the time of year, and the weather. So I do not rely on natural light alone. Another thing to keep in mind when you are trying to read your Snellen chart is you don't want to judge your ability to read a line based on how many lines you can read when you stare at it for a long period of time. You want to look and see what lines you can read just looking at it. What can you read? Go. Done. We're not trying to do active focus on it. We're not trying to look at it and let the vision swim out in and out of focus until it all becomes clear. We're not trying to squint at it. We're not trying to guess the letters, and if we guess right, we count it. And obviously make sure you're not reading it because you've memorized it. You have to actually be able to read it. We want a really basic result without too much effort. Just look at it, what can you read? That's your line. So there are a few things to look at when it comes to your Snellen measurement. Now over to your centimeters to blur measurement. And a quick shout out to Josh. Hi Josh. Well done on continuing to take care of those eyes of yours. Going outside and getting away from all those screens. You're gonna have good eyesight all your life. Well done. Obviously, when you're doing your centimeter to blur measurement, you do not want to be too optimistic. It can be hard to say exactly when you start to see a loss of clarity because this isn't a yes or no, black and white sort of answer. It is a sliding scale, but you have to be honest with yourself, and the main thing is to be consistent. So if you start to see a loss of crispness around the edges of the words, but you think, no, I would still count that as clear, and you keep moving back and you say to yourself, well, I'm gonna measure here, make sure you measure at the same point every time. Probably the most accurate place to measure is when you start to notice a loss in clarity. The edges go from really crisp lines to a place where you can still read the word fine, but suddenly the edges aren't sharp. you might still not even normally classify that as blur in a normal day-to-day situation. I also find that at a certain point the letters seem to go from black to a kind of dark grey. Nothing that I would notice if I weren't looking for it, but I find that that is also a helpful point for me. If I get to a point where the O and the C meet, I know that I've gone a little bit too far. Also, you need to pay attention to what screen you're using, what font you're using, what resolution you're using. I don't mean go into tons and tons of detail and make sure you have the perfect resolution, so buy a new computer for it or anything, but it's something to be aware of, especially if you're measuring on different devices, or if you have an older device but maybe have access to a newer device as well. If your centimeter measurements and your Snellen measurements aren't measuring up, maybe try doing your centimeter measurements on a different device and see if it becomes closer to your Snellen results. I know that I had 2 computers when I started this process, and one of them would make it much easier for me to see where the blur started because the resolution was better. On my older computer, the resolution wasn't as good, so it always looked a little fuzzy because that was just the screen and it was a lot more challenging. I would also make sure that my screen size was at 100%, but if all this is a bit complicated, if you can get a printout or some text, any text in fact, that is about a 12-point font, you can do this with a text instead of with a computer screen, and you might find you get more accurate results that way. Another thing that you need to be aware of when measuring your centimeters to blur is what level of myopia you have, because the lower your myopia, the easier it is to measure. This is because with lower diopters, there is more centimeters per diopter than with higher diopters. Let me show you using Jake's EndMyopia tape measure. So here is a black and white version of Jake's diopter tape measure. So you can see this, well, I don't know if you can see, maybe you can't, but you see you've got 1 there, or -1 rather, and here you've got -1.25. So you see the line right here. So everything from here to here, from about 89 centimeters up to 100 centimeters, would count as -1 diopter. So if you get that far from your screen, my arm isn't over a meter long, this isn't going to work. So if you get that far from your screen, that would be -1 diopter for your vision. So that would be 100 centimeters, 99, 98, 97, all the way back to 89 centimeters. So you've got a lot of wiggle room to get it wrong, because if you say you were 95 centimeters, but you're actually only 93 centimeters, you'd still get the right diopter. And if you look at this tape measure, every diopter that you drop gets a little bit shorter. So that's a bigger grey gap, but that's 2 different diopters there, you can see. Jake does have this in colour, but obviously I printed it in black and white, so it makes it a bit trickier. You can see as your diopters get higher, your wiggle room gets a lot smaller. So we've got here, let me come a bit closer. So we've got here, for example, -5.75. You have less than half a centimeter that you have to get correct there. And when it comes to -5 diopters up to -10 diopters, there is about 7.5 centimeters in those 5 diopters. And then up here, you get from -10 all the way up to -100 in about 10 centimeters. So if you have higher myopia, it will be a lot harder to measure accurately, because while down at -1, you have 11 centimeters of wiggle room. You can get it 9 centimeters off and still get the right diopter. When you get this high, if you get even half a centimeter off, or if you're above -5.75, if you get like less than half a centimeter off, you will get the wrong diopter result. So a way around this is to wear differentials while you are measuring. Differentials tend to be around 1.5 or maybe only 1 diopter less than your full correction. So if, for example, you had -6 diopters of myopia, or you needed -6 diopters of correction anyway, and you're wearing your differentials, you'd be wearing glasses that are about -5, -4.5, and that gives you 1.5 diopters approximately for you to measure if you're wearing your differentials. So you'd end up measuring and being down this end of the diopter scale. So you'd give yourself a lot more wiggle room. And then once you'd measured it, say you were wearing your -5 glasses, differential glasses, you measured it and you got 90 centimeters, you know that's 1 diopter. You add that 1 diopter onto your -5 glasses, ta-da, you've got -6. If you're wearing your -5 glasses and you measured it and you got 81 centimeters, you would know you have to add 1.25 onto your differential correction to get your normalized. So if you had this -5, got -1.25, you'd need -6.25 as a full correction. So if you have higher myopia, that could be another reason why your results and your Snellen results are not matching up. If this is something that applies to you, Not has a really good video explaining this in a bit more of a precise manner, and I will link that up here, and I'll also pop it at the end and down in the description. I hope this is of use, and please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. I appreciate it so much. And hit the little bell button to be notified every time I post. I post every Thursday. So I will see you next week. Bye! Hi guys, just yeah, some lenses on to differentiate. What am I saying?